Good afternoon, fantasy football fans. I'm Jeff DiMatteo with Gridiron Ratings, and you're watching the Dynasty Green Room. Flying solo today, my usual partner, Kyle Lindemann, out today. He's going to be week to week. We hope to see him again next week. He had a couple things he had to tend to this weekend, but I'm going to be here to kind of walk you through some of the guys we're going to see this upcoming week at the Senior Bowl. Let's go ahead and get started with quarterbacks. We've already talked at some length about Bo Nix, about Michael Penix, and a few of these guys. So if you've been keeping up with the show, you already have a sense of how we feel about those guys. So I'm not going to get too deep down that rabbit hole, except to say we expect them to show out big time. Obviously, Penix's big arm is going to be on display. Bo Nix has a little bit to prove to kind of get out of that quarterback 4, 5, 6 conversation to really propel himself up the ladder a little bit. But we really expect to see his accuracy on display. The two guys that we haven't talked about on the show in the last couple of weeks are going to be Tennessee quarterback Joe Milton and USC, that's South Carolina, not Southern California, quarterback Spencer Rattler. Joe Milton is a guy who's kind of bounced around a little bit, older senior player, huge arm. Fully expect this guy to come out here and razzle-dazzle people with his athletic ability, with his huge arm. He's got all the physical tools and traits. However, it seems on game day he has a lot of trouble putting it together in terms of accuracy, whether it is on that deep ball or in the intermediate space. He doesn't make quick reads, and he can find himself in a position where he's arm throwing a little too frequently in the short and intermediate parts of the field. Doesn't check it down like he should, and oftentimes will bail out on reads before they've fully developed. Rattler, I'm not sure what to make of this guy. This was a premium prospect, came into college football playing at Oklahoma. He was a guy that a lot of people were very, very excited about. He just never really got there, never really panned out. He was always kind of a risk for a turnover, just never really became the guy. Transfers to South Carolina, goes, and he has some pretty respectable numbers. Obviously, we're really excited about Xavier Legette, the wide receiver there, and obviously Rattler's throwing him the ball. We know he can throw it. He's got a big enough arm. He's very athletic. The guy can run around, move around, and find some time. Probably needs a bit more seasoning, but for an older prospect in his own right, it's going to be really tough to figure out where he lands in the draft and what team's going to be willing to kind of develop him and put him behind a veteran guy and say, hey, let's see what we have here when he may not start in the NFL until he's 26 or 27. Seems like a tough bet. Both of these guys have a lot to show out and a lot to prove in terms of what they've learned from their quarterback coaches and what they're going to go ahead and put together this week. So we're going to keep a close eye on them in the drills. I want to see how their throws stack up against Bo Nix specifically. I feel like Penix is going to be a different situation, different category of player. But if Rattler and Milton can come out here and wow and start to maybe diminish what Bo Nix is a little bit, they can both propel themselves up draft boards very, very quickly. So those are the first two guys. Those are the quarterbacks. Joe Milton, expect him to interview well. Huge arm. He's going to wow people with his athleticism. Don't get too caught up in it. This isn't Anthony Richardson. It's definitely a lesser version of that. Probably more like a Malik Cunningham, if you ask me. But we're going to watch him this week at practice. We're going to go ahead and check him out at the game next Saturday and start doing a little bit of follow-up from that point. Rattler, he really needs to get the whole package together. This is a guy where he might not be the best quarterback there after Joe Milton. Michael Pratt from Tulane looks like he could be a spot starter in the NFL. And you've got Hartman from Notre Dame, Sam Hartman. Great touch on his passes, strong enough arm, another guy, a little more mature. He's kind of got it figured out upstairs, but I don't know if he has the physical traits to really compete with the other quarterbacks in this class. When you think about, Caleb and McCarthy and Drake May and Jaden Daniels, it's a tough year to be one of these additional quarterbacks in terms of finding your way up the board. Let's go ahead and dive into running backs. We'll do running backs next. There's three guys here I'm very, very excited about. The first guy is a guy that to me might end up being my RB1 before this is all said and done. Tennessee running back, Jaylen Wright. Jaylen has been one of these guys that's been under the radar. He's almost a little polarizing depending on who you talk to here. Very explosive. Looks like a stronger Raheem Mostert. Runs about 5'10", 215. I'd say he's probably in the 4.4. He might even go under 4.4 category. He has plenty of yards after contact, does a nice job with a full speed sidestep cut, can make linebackers miss very quickly, doesn't take a lot of squared up hits. Detractors will comment on the fact that Tennessee doesn't get stacked boxes. They end up in a spot where they very seldom, if ever, have more than 5 or 6 guys in the box. If that becomes the case, well, there's wide open windows for him to run through. However, he's shown the power, he's shown the hands in the passing game. He's demonstrated all these different traits and attributes you really want to see from your top line NFL running backs. A guy that I would really love to see in a place like Cincinnati, a place like Miami, obviously. You put him in there to complement Achane. Place like San Francisco behind McCaffrey. He could be a major dynasty asset in another year or so. Heck, if he lands in a spot where he's the one this year, he could be an instant impact to any dynasty team, and you're probably going to get him in the late second round. Another running back to look out for is another one that might be in that RB1 conversation in this class, and that's USC, Southern California, running back Marshawn Lloyd. Now, Marshawn is a very compact player. You're talking about 5'9", 210, 215, runs exceptionally well. Didn't put up eye-popping stats for the Trojans. A big part of that has to do with the offense was really predicated on everything Caleb Williams was doing. The guy only had a handful of games this past season where he had more than 10 touches. But every time he showed out, in those 4 games, he put up 4 touchdowns. He also had 200-yard games. He had a couple of games where he had 70 rushing and 70 receiving, so he went over 100 in total yards. Doesn't get a ton of targets in the passing game. Again, I kind of look at Caleb Williams and his propensity to push the football further down the field, and it really negates Marshawn Lloyd from being able to show out as a receiver. But when he's gotten the opportunity, he has 2 games where he's caught 3 or 4 passes and gone for over 70 receiving. That's an impactful player in the passing game when you start to put those numbers together. And with his yards after contact, his stout build, I kind of wonder if this is like another Austin Eckler style player where he's going to give you a little bit of these, different pieces. He can go between the tackles. He plays well in the passing game. We didn't get to see enough of him as a real blocker. I'm not sure how I feel about that. We're going to see more of that during Senior Bowl week at the practices, but it's definitely a guy where if you're not watching him already, you're missing out because he could be a guy you're going to steal in the second round of rookie drafts. Before it's over, he might sneak into the back end of the first round. Third running back, Kentucky product, Ray Davis. Ray Davis, I've watched him on film. I've got about 6 or 7 games in on him now. He just doesn't seem to have that extra gear in the open field. I really want to see how he leverages his short area burst and quickness in practice, playing against similarly skilled players. It seemed like when the competition would get ratcheted up, he kind of fell back a little bit. I would really like to see him show out against some faster, stronger players at the Senior Bowl, because that's another guy where when everyone's fighting over wide receivers in the early to mid-second round and they're kind of getting the scraps, right? Wide receivers 13, 14, 15, you could probably turn around and take one of these 3 running backs and find a real gem. But for Davis, we want to make sure we can match his short area quickness and that power he runs with. He gets behind his pads really well, kind of the Kenyon Drake sort of vibe to me. He gets behind his pads really well, and he's just kind of reliable. I don't see him as a home run threat at the next level, but he's a guy that's probably going to have a role. So it's important to see the landing spot. Let's see how he performs at practice, because that stock could either climb all the way into the stratosphere or it could fall through the floor. Wide receivers, I've got a few guys we like here, probably names you haven't heard a ton of. The first guy I know everyone's been hearing about recently, he's been very popular on Twitter, Lad McConkey, the Georgia product. Lad has been getting some comps to guys like Curtis Samuel and some of these other receivers, but I don't know if that's entirely appropriate. This is a very savvy, smart route runner that understands how to get between players in zone. It's very, very important to understand that kind of spatial, have that spatial awareness rather, where you can kind of fit in between a linebacker and a DB, and when you're running into or away from defenders so that you're always open. And he is. I almost liken it to the way, a young Antonio Brown. He's not Antonio Brown. I'm not making that comp, but Antonio Brown, when he came into the league, was exceptional at finding those holes, working from the slot, and finding positions between linebackers and defensive backs that allowed him to always be open. Lad's the same kind of player. I'd say he's a much more twitched up version of like a Hunter Renfrow, even has some of the intangibles and smarts of a Cooper Kupp. You throw those 3 players into a blender, you're probably going to get Lad McConkey. This is a very, very talented receiver who can do quite a bit on the field, but he's painfully underrated because of all of the star power at the top of this class. Somebody's going to steal Lad McConkey in this draft. And, I hope it's you. I hope he's on your roster and putting up big time fantasy numbers for you. A couple other guys to be looking out for. Luke McCaffrey. Not a lot of folks talking about McCaffrey. Yes, he is one of those McCaffreys. Uh, I just want to see how the kid performs. He's a former quarterback, transitioned to wide receiver, kind of the inverse of what Ryan Tannehill was, going from wide receiver to quarterback. As a quarterback, you understand and see the field differently than any other position does. So to go from that position to play wide receiver, you have a better sense of maybe where do I need to be seen by the quarterback. And so when I start to look at those kind of intangibles and start to understand his multifaceted view of the game, this looks like a developmental player that somebody's going to get in the mid-late rounds, that he's got enough athletic ability, a phenomenal pedigree, and he's probably going to be a very useful player for somebody. I can't wait to see him. I want to see how he lines up and how he finds those open holes and really how well he's targeted by some of these premium quarterbacks in this class. The third guy here, Malachi Corley. Malachi Corley looks like a guy that can, really play after the catch. Compact build, not as big as he looks on film. Smaller school guy. Really need to see him step up into this premium competition space. I want to see what he does against the field. And this is the theme, right, of practice week and why we're doing a Senior Bowl preview. These are just the names of guys we want to look out for this week to see how they fit into the grander ecosystem of these players in the draft lead up, right? Malachi Corley is a guy that kind of, I don't want to say he has like a Debo trait. I think it gets overused, but he catches the ball exceptionally well. And then he's great with it in his hands after the catch. I love guys that run with power and aggression after the catch. They find ways to get first downs. When you're moving the chains, you're valuable. You're on the field. Corley does some of that. I really want to see how he can be aggressive at the catch point. I want to see how he goes against higher end corners. It's one thing to be the best kid in a smaller conference and beat up on a bunch of guys that won't be playing on Sundays. But now that a lot of these guys will be playing on Sundays at the Senior Bowl, it's going to be nice to see how he really stacks up. Another guy, we're in a very stacked wide receiver class, could be stolen in the later rounds of your fantasy draft. So definitely someone to keep an eye on. The last guy here is Xavier Legette. Seeing a lot of hype around this guy. Some people are trying to comp him to A.J. Brown and some others. I'm not there. He gets caught up in traffic too frequently in the middle of the field. I don't know that he's uniquely fast. I think he's a bully in blocking. He's definitely going to block. I think those teams that really want to see their wide receivers be aggressive downfield, opening up holes and blocking, hey, Legette does that. He shows the effort. I don't know that he's a crisp route runner, but he's a guy that will body up, box out, and go ahead and win at the catch point. So there's a little bit of up and down in his game. There was some limitation. I think some of this was scheme at South Carolina. Some of it might have been Spencer Rattler. I'm not really sure. I kind of just want to see the kid in the drills one-on-one and see how he gets separation. Because in this game, if you're not getting separation, it's really hard to win one-on-one in contested situations with consistency. It could really hurt him from a fantasy standpoint and keep him in a position where you're not going to ever want to put him in your lineup. Like he'll have pop games and things like that, but that's not the kind of guy we want to get involved with, right? We want to look for consistent high-end fantasy production. Legette has a lot to show this week to make sure he can really be there. He's going to get hyped up by a lot of other accounts. It's important to kind of maybe dial back some of that hype and start to understand what kind of player is he in relation to the other guys coming out this year. We do have one tight end here that I'm really excited about. And I say really excited. I just kind of want to see him run. And that's Theo Johnson out of Penn State. This was a kid a couple of years ago, kind of looked like a guy with a proper development that he would develop very, very quickly. And he would turn into a guy that would be a top-end tight end prospect. It just hasn't fully come together for him. He's a good receiver. He can work all parts of the field. But I just want to see him running against real coverage. I want to see how he operates against zone when the players are frankly better. Penn State wasn't good enough through the air. Alar is coming along as a passer, but he's not there yet. So it really kind of stifled what Theo Johnson could do. The other guy is actually a wide receiver that I'm hoping converts to tight end, and that's Johnny Wilson from Florida State. Talking about a ginormous catch radius. This guy, if it's in the zip code, he's going to pull it in. Excellent hands. I don't know that he has the long speed or even the short area quickness necessarily to be a wide receiver at the next level. He's looked good on a couple of big plays where he gets open against a broken coverage or he just happens to sneak behind some people, and it makes him look a lot faster than he probably is on film. To me, he looks like a high 4.6 guy, and I hope I'm wrong there. But if this is a guy with his size, he's over 6'5", I want to say he's about 230, 235 or so. He looks big. He's a big guy. I want to see the official weight and height come in on him. That's going to be another dude that we're looking at and saying, hey, can he kick inside and become a Darren Waller type player? Because I would love that for him. I think he'd be a incredible tight end to add to this class when it already has Brock Bowers and Jatavion Sanders. This class is loaded with talent on the offensive side. So quick review, Senior Bowl guys we're looking for right now and through the practices. We want to keep an eye on Spencer Rattler and Joe Milton. How do they show out and how do they stack up against the more premium names? Marshawn, Lloyd, Jaylen, Wright, Ray Davis at running back. Can Wright and Lloyd really kind of propel themselves to being the RB1 and 1A in this class? And if so, can they go ahead and outshine some of the wide receivers? And those will be the names to start keeping an eye on there. Wide receiver, what are we getting out of Luke McCaffrey, right? Luke McCaffrey, Lad McConkey, Malachi Corley. Those are the guys we want to see. Again, we're just getting familiarized. We're still early in the process. We've watched a lot of the film and the cut-ups, right? Now the snaps matter again. And so let's see how they stack up in these all-star environments where they're playing against a lot of other guys that are at their level. Tight end, Theo Johnson out of Penn State. Want to just see how he runs. Is this a player that we can count on at the next level? Is he going to be athletic enough, or is he just going to get relegated to tight end 2 detail somewhere? And then Johnny Wilson, is he going to make a position change? Or is he going to stick in this ultra deep wide receiver class? So it'll be very, very telling to see how these NFL coaches use these players during the practices and on game day. Be sure to tune in to NFL Network all week for Senior Bowl coverage. They're going to have you set up with all the practices. They start 10:30 in the morning. At least the coverage, I believe, starts 10:30 in the morning, NFL Network, and on NFL Plus on Tuesday. You'll practices on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then Saturday, February 3rd, Senior Reese's Bowl, 1 p.m. on NFL Network and NFL Plus. I'm going to do a separate kind of touch-up preview for defensive players, maybe doing that one on the Getting Defensive show, but that one's not happening right now. So if you have questions or comments, or if there's a player you want to hear more about, I'll be at the Senior Bowl this week, providing all kinds of live content and updates from practice. Right after practice, I'll be logging in, putting all my notes together, and I'll be trying to get it right back out to you guys so you can be aware of everything that's happening, who's showing out, who's disappointing, and how these guys are starting to fit into this grander draft class ecosystem. So with that, I'm Jeff DiMatteo of Gridiron Ratings. I hope you found this preview useful. Gives you a few names to keep an eye on and starts to help you build out your draft board for May. Until next time, have a good one. Take care.